Namaste, yogis. This is Adrienne.
And Mia.
Welcome to another episode of How Yoga Changed My Life, a podcast. Mia, how you doing?
I'm chilling. We are doing this remote today, so my audio might sound a little bit different than yours to our listeners, but just had a full weekend and just feeling relaxed, right? Grateful.
I know you're in your closet, recording from your closet.
My closet.
For all those out there, if you ever have an interview or a podcast interview you need to do, get in your closet because it's nice and soundproof with all your clothes.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I've been dealing with a corneal abrasion on my eye all week long, which has been a real big pain in my freaking ass, and kind of been one of those things that has been distracting and annoying and a constant achy thing, and I'm driving around town without any glasses or contacts on and hoping I just get where I need to go. But
yeah,
that's life sometimes. It's how it goes. I know. How about teaching this week? How's teaching been?
Good. I didn't get to teach my Saturday class because I was out of town, but that's given me some time to create a new playlist. I'm trying to be better at creating themed and intentional playlist. It's been fun when I do it and I miss it when I don't. But for me, not being extremely musically inclined or a big music listener, it's really hard for me to do, and it takes a lot of effort. But otherwise good. Right now, I'm just in a season of planning. As we kind of approach the end of the year, I'm starting to map out everything for 2024.
Mm-hmm.
For our listeners, Adrienne and I both work at a kind of gym, right? A gym-ish type studio.
Yeah, it's like a group fitness gym.
Yeah. And so there's yoga, and then there's all these other modalities. And on the yoga side of things, I'm considered the yoga lead. And so I've just been really excited about planning yoga for 2024.
Mm-hmm.
I want to think really big, and yeah, big is the best way I can think about it. So I've been very excited and fueled by that planning.
I know you like to plan stuff out. You're good at that too, which
Big
is
time.
Where I kind of get lost in planning, and I just let's just do it. Let's just try it. I mean, I am a planner for the most part. I'm a researcher, that's for sure. If I'm getting into something, I'm going to look it up. Yeah, I taught on a Saturday at the studio, and I taught my first Saturday class there that just started. That's a 30-minute breath work and meditation class, which was really nice. It's kind of interesting that today's interview is with our friend Amanda. You'll get to hear from her in a minute. And with her interview, what we'll be talking about is kind of something that I did in meditation yesterday. I was talking about the senses and kind of how you can meditate and understand how to kind of separate the senses and be aware of what's going on, but also what's going on around you, what's going on inside of you, and being able to separate the two. Yeah. So it's been good.
How was the breathwork class? I know a lot of members were requesting it for some primetime slot, and I think weekend is definitely primetime.
Totally. I think it's going to be great. I think timing-wise, I think having it on a Saturday morning between two classes and between other classes at the studio, I think people will try it out. You know, meditation and breathwork is weird, and people don't know how to start it at home. So this is a practice at a studio that we started just to kind of see, hey, you can take this home with you. You can take a few minutes and breathe or meditate by yourself now. And, giving them the permission to do that is, I think, huge. People just sit there and go, well, I remember when I first meditated, what the fuck am I doing? How do I do this? You just sit there, right? But it's more than that. And I think that teaching people how to meditate in a very small way, and then they can take it off their mat, they can take it home with them, is a little bit more impactful than just saying hey, I'm going to meditate. Join a group,
Definitely.
Get with others that are like-minded.
Yeah. And I get that feedback about our podcast a lot, actually, that they appreciate that folks like the practice that we offer. Because obviously, we could, in theory, lead you through an asana, a physical practice, but mostly we're offering you a lot of meditation and journaling, and it's just a different way to practice yoga, and at home in a personal way.
I totally agree. I was talking to a couple of the students after class and said, hey, check out the podcast because we do have these extra episodes that are after every interview. And for me, at first when we started, I was like, oh, nobody's going to listen to these. And it took a while for people to understand how they can implement them in their day. They can utilize them well. Obviously, you're not going to be meditating while you're driving, but you have a few minutes and they're not long. So we kind of threw those in as a little garnish on each one of our interviews, because if yoga is so much more than movement. It is so much more than that. And if you can get that into your head, that when I say yoga, it's the big why. It's not just the asana practice.
Yeah. Sweet.
Cool.
Well, let's jump into our episode.
Yes.
This one was really cool for me.
Mhm.
Adrienne and I had not met Amanda before outside of kind of passing. I think I had practiced alongside her at a former yoga studio. Like I knew her, she was familiar. It's kind of thing where you just see each other on Instagram. Maybe that was the passing. I don't know. But this was our first time sitting down and having a conversation with her. And over again, I'm grateful for this podcast because we've gotten to meet people in this manner and hear their story. And again affirm the impact that yoga has on people's lives.
Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure getting to talk to Amanda. And then even having that bonus episode that will be dropping at some point as a surprise for you on trauma-informed language in yoga. I think that's really important. Some really cool pieces about kind of how we speak and the words that we choose to use, not only in a studio, but outside of a studio in a different, center, of course. So cool. Let's get into it then. Boom.
Welcome back to the How Yoga Changed My Life, a podcast. Despite my voice, this is Mia.
This is Adrienne.
And today we have with us a guest, as always, Amanda. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda, just give our listeners a little introduction to who you are.
Who I am, such a great question. My name is Amanda. I'm originally from San Antonio, and I love this city. I am a teacher, a facilitator, a listener, a daughter, a friend, a supporter. Yeah, I think I play many roles in community, and I love animals. I'm an animal lover.
Nice. What kind of animals specifically?
I'm a big cat person. I have one cat. Her name's Foxy, and one dog named Sally.
Nice. I like Foxy.
Yeah.
Mia's got 4 cats.
Wow.
4.
Wow.
One was an accident.
That's what a lot of parents say about their kids.
Yeah, they usually are, right?
Yeah. I just keep collecting them.
There's usually one surprise.
Yeah. One was definitely a surprise.
But she's not a weird old cat lady yet. Not yet.
Well, you won't be alone.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about your background. So you're from San Antonio. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a brother who lives in Austin. I have 2 beautiful nephews. He has like really great sons. It's awesome to watch him be a dad.
Oh, nice.
My parents were divorced from a really young age, and then my dad remarried at the time that I was 3 years old. So I do have a stepbrother and a stepsister. They both live in Kansas. But I'm speaking about them. They've been in my life since I've been 3 years old. So it's like I say I'm one of 4. I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Yeah.
My sister and I are 6 months apart. So that's where the explanation comes in, where I need to let people know she's my stepsister, because they're like, how are you 6 months apart? And I'm like, well, here's the thing.
It's not an Irish twin thing.
Yeah.
It's too short of a time frame.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, very cool. And you get along with everybody?
Yeah. So my brother in Kansas also has 2 sons. So there's like a lot of little boys running around in the family. And we do get to see them often, go up to Kansas, or they come down here. And, as we're all growing older, I think like we're really valuing our connection and our time together, especially since we've lost a lot of people in family, like just get older. And so we're really like valuing I don't know, what is life, right? When you're a kid, you never think you're going to get old.
No, you don't. Like I said this before. I never thought I'd make it past 21. I never saw my life past 21. It's so weird. But
I did hear something really neat. It was very interesting that I heard recently. That was something like, everyone gets to be young, but not everybody gets to grow old. I thought that was pretty profound.
That is pretty profound. It's true. Yeah, I mentioned this on the podcast. I've done a death doula training, and we don't talk about death in the community. And then as we're kids, you know, our experience with death can be different because even like you said, you were really young when your parents got divorced. Like depending on what age point you're at is dependent upon how you'll handle it. And a lot of times like kindergartners through like 8th or 9th, you know, 8 or 9 years old will think of it like a death, right? And they'll mourn it.
It is. Yeah, absolutely is a death. Like that my life before that is gone. You know, like there's a death of that life before being 3 years old.
No, absolutely. So did you go to college?
I did. I took a pretty unconventional or untraditional route in college. I did San Antonio Community College and finished with an associate's degree, actually like in marketing and design. I had a little bit of a background in the retail world. And so I thought, let me just do what I know and go into like business. And I really had wanted to design planograms for stores and like local boutiques.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like in like retail shops, not like grocery.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I used to work for Coors. We would do planograms of like where the beer would go on the shelves and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I loved looking at them. They're so pretty.
It's fun. Yeah. So I thought I would design like a boutique's, you know, planogram. And that's just not what happened, which is okay.
So what did happen?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting that we were talking about death because I thank you for your questions. I like to feel a little bit prepared, even though you're like, oh, you don't need to do much to prepare. But talking about death, in 2009, I lost my dad. I was working in retail at the time, and I have a long history in early childhood development. So I've always worked with kids. It's still a part of my journey. I'm still working with kids. Yeah, interesting that you're talking about death. In 2009, I lost my dad, and that is when my yoga journey began with the Bikram series. And there was like an introduction, right, where you could buy a certain amount of classes for a certain amount of time in this program. And at the end of that yoga class in Savasana, I just had hot tears running down my face, like streaming down my face. And I had no idea what was happening. I was 19 at the time. So I had this background in retail, and that was really familiar. I had also been working part-time as a nanny. And then I'm finding yoga, and I've lost my dad. And I kept going back to this class and practicing and getting hot and sweaty and crying every time. And it's so interesting to me now because at 19, I couldn't put them together. Like I didn't understand what was actually happening in Savasana at that time.
Which is like the saddest thing in the world if you really think about it, you know, that we didn't know that at 19.
Well, I'm glad I didn't know that at 19 because I think it would have scared me.
That's true too. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, because now I can process what happened and have like a lot of compassion and gratitude to myself at that time. But I think if I had been a little too aware, I would have freaked out. I just would have like turned around running and not come back.
That makes sense too, because then it's like I have to face it. You would know that you would be facing it. That's actually a really good point. So can I ask how your father passed?
Yeah, I like to say he is a statistic. He had esophageal cancer from smoking cigarettes.
Oh, geez. Okay. And then was it like a long...
No, it was really fast. So he got sick and he went through very like aggressive chemo and radiation. They removed a part of his like esophagus and they stretched it. Like I think it's like a little oval in our, and then I don't know all the medical ways, but they, shrinked his stomach and his esophagus. And he went into remission for maybe like 2 months. Like maybe there was like this time in July and August, he was out of treatment, feeling good, and boom, it was back immediately almost. And so he asked his doctor at that time, he said, how long do I have? And the doctor said, 6 to 12 months with chemo and 3 maybe without. And it was fast.
Did he decide to do the chemo or did he decide not to?
He decided not to, yeah.
I'm glad he got to make that decision for himself.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at the time. He told me, the first time that when the cancer came back and he went into chemo, his legs from his ankles to his thighs were the same size. They swelled up so much that his legs were like the same size as his thigh all the way down.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really painful for him. And he didn't want to live the last like time of his life in that type of suffering. And so, yeah, he told me that he wasn't going to do it. And I didn't understand. Oh my gosh, I got so mad. I was yelling at him and I was crying, and he was like, this is the quality of my life. And, I think I thought he was giving up, or I was like angry. I just didn't understand. And at that time, there's no one to cast any blame on. However, in that time of my life, I wish someone would have like sat me down and looked me in the eyes and said very clearly, Amanda, your dad is going to die. Like I didn't know. I really, really didn't know that like I couldn't conceptualize that this was happening.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we don't talk about death. We just don't. It's taboo to talk about, no one even plans ahead. I lost my stepbrother a few months ago. He was 39 years old and just dropped dead. And he wasn't on any drugs. Toxicology was clean, all that stuff. So they think it was either an aneurysm or a heart attack. And he didn't have a will. We didn't know what to do with him. Do you know what I mean? Like there's certain things that I think as people we should plan and prepare for in a way that's loving, right? And like that death is a transition, whatever that means to you, right? But you will no longer be here in a physical form. So how do we teach our kids that there's still energy around? Right. And there is a path forward with time. But there could have been so many things you could have done. Like there's so many things, like there's legacy work that you could have gotten to do with him. Right.
Yeah.
Like that to me is really cool. Doing this process of the death doula certification, they had us do a case study. And I had a woman who loved gemstones. So I had them make mala necklaces together, right, in my case study. So that was something that was like giving back and having something that you could have. And then at the funeral, I put in like a jar and paper, and people could write the memories and then give it to the family, and the family could pass it around. But like things like that and those tools, we just didn't have those back then.
Totally. And that makes me think about too, like this idea of legacy or history or lineage and ancestry. My dad was pretty estranged from his family. Like I didn't meet, his mom until his funeral.
Wow.
I didn't get to know his dad, my grandfather, and he died with heart complications. And he was just, something happened in his lifetime where he wanted to not be connected to family, which I think is normal. Like there's a lot of times that happens.
Yeah.
But where I am now in my life, I feel not necessarily alone, but I have this like deep yearning or like deep longing for knowing who I am, and not just on like this surface, what you see level, but like knowing who I am in like my blood and my cell and my bones and my tissues and my, my skeleton and I don't have him here to ask those questions. Right. Like and a lot of his family is gone. And, so it's like, I'm doing this work to find out who I am from his side of the family and this ancestry, like without, concrete or like tangible, tools, right? Like, I mean, I use like prayer and meditation to like find these things, but so it's interesting that you said that, because I would have loved to, if I had known differently, which, I have a lot of gratitude. I'm not saying like if I had known I would blah, 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 but,
well, it was what happened.
Yeah. I would have asked him questions. I just would have, probably like written a lot of things down, or I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what I would have done, but
yeah, I know. Yeah. But having those tools.
Yeah.
Thinking about that moment at the end of class, the hot tears, what brought you back despite that? Because I would imagine maybe it's a little overwhelming.
I don't know. I wanted to feel that they were real. Like the first time they happened, I wasn't sure. I think I was like, is this really happening? And so, yeah, I went back and it kept happening. So I knew it was real. Oh, that's such a good question. I haven't thought about that in so long because it's been so long ago. Something about just the movement and breathing and being lost in my body without any like cognitive functioning actually happening. I was like, wow, like that is something. It wasn't even logical. I'll say this. My body knew it before my brain.
Yeah.
My body brought me back, not my brain. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. I mean, the whole enteric nervous system, you know, your gut, your intuition, all of that is the only part of your nervous system that's interdependent from the brain. I think I said that right, which means that it will get the signal before and will be able to interpret it way before it gets to the brain. And so that's like why we say, trust your gut, trust your first instinct, because if you do that, that really is showing you it's this, and animals have it. It's, you know, it's a safety. It's, you know, the idea that if energy comes towards you, your body can sense that way before, you know, and like you said before, like a deep knowing of who I am is trusting your gut, is really turning inward into that intuition, right?
Something I'm learning now, how to hear, right? Really, or listen. But I do believe our bodies are smarter than our minds. Like I think my body knows more than what my brain can hear, say, speak, smell, whatever.
Yeah, I call the brain the worst case scenario handbook, right? It's like the worst case scenario handbook. This is the shit that's going to go wrong, right? And everything's bad, and you're bad, and all the things are bad. But then your gut is like, nope. Brain, we need you sometimes. We need you for memories. We need you for things. But for the most part, your brain will tell you that you're done when you have 40% left in your body. So it's like I always use the example in class, like when people are like, oh my God, I'm just so tired. I'm like, you are tired, but once you get on your mat and you start moving your energy will give you more energy.
I think of the analogy like riding a bike. You know, you get on it and you just kind of like know what to do. Your brain doesn't have to think about it. Your body just starts reacting.
That's so true. So you started at a Bikram studio, and how long did you practice at that studio?
I think it was intermittent. I think for like a couple of years, or maybe just about a year, I kind of toe dipped in and out, dropped into classes here and there.
I did have a question for you. When you said that, like you said, your dad passed in 2009, and then you went to the Bikram studio, how much time between when your dad passed and when you first got on your yoga mat?
Yeah, that's a good question. So he died in November of 2009. Oh my gosh, I want to say like pretty quickly. Like it was winter when we found the Bikram studio because it's a hot studio. And I remember getting out of there like in the winter. So it must have been December, January, February, like not before spring.
So what made you walk in there? Like, did a friend just say like,
my
hey?
stepmom, yeah, she was always kind of like finding a journey in physical fitness, right? Like a way to kind of change her body, which I think many of us, I can identify with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so she found it. It was in our neighborhood, and she was like, hey, let's go try it. They have this introductory class. You can take like, 10 classes for $20 or something like that, where you like come every day. And so we were like, sure, why not? Let's do it. So my stepmom and my stepsister and we all tried it together. I don't think my stepmom stayed with me. Like we went a couple more times. I don't think my sister, I don't have a lot of memories of like hers.
Yeah. I was going to say, do they practice yoga now?
Oh, my sister does. She practices with me. She
awesome.
has come into San Antonio a couple of times, and there's been 2 times where she's been able to like join me in practice, which is like touches my heart so deeply when someone you like love, friend or family member, like actually comes to your practice.
Yes.
Like that is wild. So yeah, she has practiced with me.
I think it's interesting you said it that way too, because, we always say, have you tried yoga? Have you tried yoga? You know, like that's our answer because we know it works. But then the people that we love the most that don't want to come and take yoga because whatever the reason is at that time. But it always cracks me up that like when you do get I had a friend of mine, Jill, I'm shouting you out, so you better be listening. She had never walked into a gym. She goes, I have only walked into a fitness center when I'm walking through it to get to the pool at the hotel. And so I said, well, come to one of my yoga classes. She goes, I want to come. She goes, but I don't want to do it. I go, fine, you don't have to do it. She goes, can I just sit there and watch? And I go, well, yes, and you can sit there and watch me, but please don't like stare at the students as they're doing it, you know? So she did. She rolled out her mat. She sat there and she watched me the entire time. And I just thought maybe one time she'll start moving. And she ended up trying yoga a few times and really enjoyed it at home. But it was funny just to have her there just watching me, you know, but having the gift that we know that's there, it can be a little bit intimidating to the ones that we love to get them to come to.
It always makes me nervous. It still makes me nervous when a friend or like a family member comes to class. I'm like, oh, what do I do?
I know, exactly.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
I think it's because we're vulnerable. We're
That's
holding
true.
space, right? And then we know that we're holding space for them in a totally different way than they're not used to being with us.
Yeah, I think when I tell people who I'm like first meeting or friends, I think when I'm teaching, that's like the most truest form of who I am. Like that's really who I am on like a soul level, is like who I am when I'm teaching.
Oh, that's so cool. That just gave me chills. Okay, so we talked about how you found your yoga mat. And you talked a little bit about the tears. It was really what brought you back to your yoga mat. But then, you know, we kind of ebb and flow. You said a couple of years kind of dropping in and out. I think that happens with most people, right?
I was kind of like toe dipping into different studios, different teachers, different fitness locations, right?
What were some of the things that you liked and some of the things that you didn't like on your journey of exploration?
That's a good question. Yeah, in 2012, 2013, I started going to like a big box gym, and I only went there for yoga, right? Like, or I was going to like find their classes. Maybe I wasn't only going for yoga because I didn't know at the time, but me and gyms, like I don't know what to do in a gym. I don't know what to do. So I go into the studio and I found this teacher. I'll shout out to her. I don't know if she'll listen, but I hope she does. Her name's Harini. And I started taking her class and I fell in love with Warrior 2. Like something happened in my body that I have this like very like visceral memory of like being in Warrior 2. And I heard you say shit earlier. So I'm going to say,
no, you're allowed to curse.
Okay.
Oh yeah. No, we're sailors.
I was like, holy shit. Like this pose is so hard. And I like love it so much. And I like feel so strong. And so I kept going back to her class a couple times there. And the full circle of it, about a year or 2 years ago, I started teaching in this new position, and there was other teachers coming in. It was in a mental facility, a mental institution. And this little teacher, this little Indian woman, like walks in, and I'm like, wow, you look so familiar. And she was like, really? And so I didn't remember her name when I took her class back then, but now we were working together, and she was a teacher that I had fallen in love with years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I didn't think I would ever see her again. I didn't know how to find her.
Oh my God.
And she
that's
confirmed.
True.
She was like, yeah, I was teaching at this location at that time.
That's so funny. A lot of times when we ask people that are new to yoga, we're saying like, you know, whose class did you take? They're like, oh, I don't remember their name, but it was at Monday at 9. You know what I mean? Like they don't always remember our names. And I kind of like that.
So it wasn't until 2014 that my practice became more like concrete or more dedicated, right? In 2014 is when I really committed, I think. I mean, I think I was always committed to yoga, but it became a part of my weekly routine. Like
a habit.
Yeah. 2-3 times a week I was going to yoga, and that's also where I found like my mentor teacher and who I'm still close with, and so that's when it started, when deeply I was in the habit and routine of this practice. And then in so 2014, this time is going by, and then 2018 2018, 2019, I had gone to a yoga class, and a teacher or a student came up to me after this yoga class, and she said, "Oh, you have such a strong practice. Where do you teach? You must be a teacher." I was like, "Oh, I'm not a teacher."
But you're
And
like, hey, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, this happened, I shit you not, 2 more times within 2 weeks. So I went to another class, different location, different place, right? And someone comes up to me and they're like, "Wow, you just look like a really strong teacher. You must be a teacher." I was like, "I'm not a teacher." And then again, a third time, and being a student, someone came up to me and said, "I think you're a teacher." And I was like, "Okay, God, I think I should be a teacher."
Exactly. I hear you. It just took me 3 times. Yeah.
And so that's when I started doing some research in the city in San Antonio and looking for schools. And I found Esther Wexler Yoga School. And I knew Esther as a little girl.
No way.
Yeah. So I was raised with Judaism and have a lineage and heritage of being Jewish and still identify that way. And so was Esther. So she was a part of my temple community growing up.
That's so cool.
And so when I found her school here, I was like, "Okay, God, here we go again."
Yeah.
Laying it on thick.
Yes, totally. And I applied for her program, and we started yoga teacher training in 2019, and then it ended in COVID. So we were a class that had to go online in 2020 to end our yoga teacher training that way.
How long did you have to do the online portion of it?
Okay, so the teacher training is 9 months, 9 months. So it started in September. So it was finishing up in like April. So like,
Oh, wow. So the end of it.
March, April, like those last like couple of weeks.
Wow, that must have been really a challenging period because as some of you listeners know that have done any kind of training that requires you to dive deep, right? There are a lot of things that can come up, but during a global pandemic and you're about to end something and go into a totally different world now than what you were used to. It's like, okay, I just learned how to touch people and like hold space for them. And now I'm on Zoom.
It was wild. Our director at the time did a really great job navigating the class and all these people and these moving parts, right? And like Zoom was just becoming a thing. We're like, all of a sudden now we know about this thing Zoom and let's do that. And so yeah, it was interesting because we were, like this whole 9 months, you're so close with these people and you're in the room with them and you're communicating with them and you're having dialogue with them. And then that completely shifts, right? And we rely to some extent on our learning experience from what other people are saying and what other people are doing. And especially at this time where you're going through practicum, right? Like I was getting to see how other people are going into teaching and then other people are getting to see me and like how we do that. And yeah, it was wild. And we had like turn in homework and do our final exams and, all this stuff in this like virtual world.
Yeah. And then what happens afterwards? What did you end up doing afterwards?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started teaching a little bit online, right? Because that was just kind of like where we were going. I'm pretty active in community and service work. So at the time, I had just gotten into volunteering for the RCC, the Rape Crisis Center, and I was on their hotline crisis intervention. So I was like answering phone calls.
No way.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it so much. I was doing like this like late night shift.
Wait, how? Like, do you have to have like a certain qualification or degree to do something like that? That seems
no. So you can contact them, and they do make you go through like a screening process, and they kind of want to make sure that you're going to be committed to volunteering. There's a little bit of training. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that must have been really intense.
There was times it was intense. Yeah, it was really rewarding because really those people just need you to listen and let them know that they aren't alone and have resources. And it's hard because sometimes there's a tendency to be like stuck in victim mentality, which is true. Like, you have been victimized.
Or like the why did this happen to me kind of thing.
And so it's really hard I can't give anybody a sense of willingness. I can't like make somebody be willing to do something for themselves. So it is challenging to try to share resources with them and hear that they're like not necessarily ready to take resources. So it was cool. So I did get to start teaching virtually for the Rape Crisis Center, mostly to their staff. I can't remember if they opened it up to, I don't think it was for patients. It was more just like the staff there. And then at the time, when I started teaching yoga, I thought, okay, I'm going to teach yoga and I'm done working with kids. Like I've worked with kids for a really long time. I did the nanny thing and I was like, no more kids, I'm going to transition. And the first teaching positions I got was working for kids, teaching kids through another organization here in San Antonio that helps teachers get connected to certain schools and daycares. And so I started like teaching kids yoga. Some of it was online. And then I think at the time when we were ready to like be in person, I started teaching at this daycare that like really touches my heart. It's this little school off West Avenue. They're like a little family business. They have this really cool kind of pavilion in their facility that was outside, right? So we were like, okay, are you comfortable teaching kids outside? And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Well, I mean, I started a company in Chicago called Family Flow Yoga with my friend because we were teaching kids yoga. That's kind of how we got into a little business of our own. And there's such an impact that yoga has on a kid after the first time. I mean, like, whereas in a grown up, it might take 3 times of like hearing it, or doing it or seeing it. But for a kid, you can put them in Shavasana and that kid is out cold, and it's like, that's what that kid needed. It was just that time to release,
Yeah, kids are fun. They're really playful. You just have to be on like high energy all the time, and
it's exhausting.
It is exhausting
as a teacher.
Yeah, and I recognized at that point, I believe that I just was given an unmerited gift to work with children. It's like not something I asked for. It was also not something I really thought I wanted, But I do have a gift to work with children of all ages.
What's your favorite age?
Oh, I love toddlers, like 2, 3, 4 is really fun. I'm not a baby person. Some people who see babies are like, oh, let me hold it. Like, oh, let me have that baby. Like I have the opposite reaction. I'm like, oh, like slowly kind of retract when I see babies.
I'm the person that's like, give me that chunky baby leg. Yeah. So I love it.
You would be opposite. Yeah. And then I love most ages. I mean, I think middle school too is they're all weird.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of fucking weirdos.
Yeah.
And they're all awkward and gangly. And they look like aliens.
Totally.
And they feel like aliens.
It's hard to pick a favorite when you love kids. I love kids. So, as long as they're already like walking, that's great. I'm okay with
as long as you can walk on your own, we can hang out.
Yeah. So in 2020, and I was also like in a supportive partnership at that time. And he was very encouraging. He was like, Amanda, you are a great teacher. You need to teach yoga. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, yoga is not going to make a living. Like, I am not going to be able to like monetize and feel stability and security by only teaching yoga. Like, it's a hustle. Like, I mean, you teach one class for 1 hour with kids, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and you're going back and forth. And, he was just really supportive at that time. There was a really like good safety net for me to really take my little happy feet and, walk off the ledge.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really grateful for that time in my life and that relationship. There was a lot of purpose there. And I'm thankful that door is closed now too, but I wouldn't be in this position of what I'm doing now. Like, I'm only working as a yoga teacher. It's my 9 to 5. I work Monday through Friday and I'm making a great living. I'm really comfortable. I'm really happy. I feel really fulfilled. I have a lot of purpose. So I'm grateful for that time. In the pandemic, it was kind of like this precipice of like people either running into their dreams or desires or like running away from. I think it was very kind of like cut and dry, like you're either going towards or going away. And so I'm glad that I went towards this creative.
Tell us a little bit more. What is your teaching schedule like?
That's exactly what I was
that
going to
you
ask.
do 9 to 5?
You are awesome. Okay. My teaching schedule. So right now in the pandemic time, like going into 2021, I found a yoga teacher training online called Yoga Behind Bars. And it was a trauma informed, teaching, not in Texas. They're based,
I've heard of them before.
Yeah. And so that was my first experience with trauma informed teaching, and I was hooked. I was
All
like,
right.
Let's go there later.
Okay, good. Good.
I
'Cause
love
do.
both of your faces.
I
Like
do.
we're very
I know.
intense.
No, I love it. No, I love it. Keep going.
And so once I did that, I was like, I can't go back. Like just the language that is used and teaching to people who have been incarcerated or through trauma or, victims of sexual assault or abuse. I just knew that that's like what I was going to do. So I found these trainings online, right? And it's, a lot of them were designed like trauma informed yoga and social justice, right? Somatic experiencing, polyvagal facilitation. Yeah.
God, I love all that shit.
All of this.
Love it all.
Same.
Yes.
And so there was a beginning module, right? Like module 1, module 2, and then mentorship. So that's like 100 hours of training. And then there's intermediate 1, intermediate 2, and then mentorship, right? And then a facilitation 1. So I've gone through about 150 hours, maybe 200 hours of, and that might be an over quotation. Don't quote me on those numbers.
We don't care. That's fine.
Of trauma-informed training. So that is what led me to what my schedule is like now. I work in a facility where people are battling eating disorder, ED, and mental health, like PTSD, anxiety, depression, people that are coming to get treated for mental health. And
there's like different parts to it too, because it's like when you have like one that's like a long term or a longer term or maybe like a shorter term visit, do they have that like delineation? Like if you're there because you have an eating disorder, are you there for like a rehab period type thing?
Yeah. So it's partial outpatient, right? PHP program. And so they're there usually about 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. But it's a long day. It's like 8 to 4, it's all day, every day, Monday through Sunday. So right now my schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this facility. That's like 9:30 to 2:30. I teach 4 classes. And then intermittently, right, I'm in a couple public studios. So I teach some public classes Tuesday, Thursdays, and Friday evenings. And then also Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm in other recovery centers. I'm in a recovery treatment center, right? People who are there to detox and get into sobriety. They're going through drug and alcohol treatment, and those are my people. I love those people. So I'm there in those facilities about 3 to 4 times a week.
That's amazing.
Considering the proximity to trauma and really heavy, moments in someone's life, how do you balance that personally? Do you carry it? Like, I mean, I'm someone who works in middle school and I carry that heavily. Like working with kids can impact me. Adrienne is very emotionally. And so I would imagine there's some level of impact on you. Do you ever have to navigate that?
Yes. So the first job that I got in, one of the first very like serious jobs of teaching yoga was at Laurel Ridge. And I was working with the kids, patients. Yeah. So we would see anywhere from 4 years old to 17 years old. And if you're familiar with how that facility is run, right, there's different units, right? So there's a unit maybe called like San Saba, and these kids are the aggressors. And then there's a unit called Brazos, and these kids are struggling with like bipolar and schizophrenia. And then there's another unit where kids have come in because they're there for CPS placement, or they've been the victims of the abuse and the sex trauma. So they have to keep them all separate, right? You can't like put an abuser with someone who's been abused. Yeah. Right. So I had no idea that job was going to have such a deep effect on me. I'm really, really this part kind of touches my heart because I'm so grateful for that work, because I know that I believe that I can do it. Like I think that there's people who have good hearts and big intentions and lots of passion and many years of education, right, and knowledge, but they can get into these spaces and they maybe shouldn't be there. Like, that's just my personal opinion. Okay. Not everybody is like cut out for doing that kind of work, even if you're passionate about it, even no matter how much you know about it. It's experiential. You get in there, excuse me, and experimental, you know? And so that work opened my eyes and my hearts to, like, I had this moment with like my spirituality, and I was like, wow, Amanda, you are capable of this. Like, deep in my heart and deep in my soul and deep in my body and my intuition is like a very strong knowing that I'm capable of seeing what happens in those places. So recently I started exploring new forms of like healing, and I work with like an energy healer. And so we were going through my root chakra, and I thought I'd worked through all of this stuff, right? I was like, okay, I've seen it all. I at that time I was in that partnership, and I would come home, and you know, there are days where I would come home crying because you just can see really intense things happen. Kids get, you know, detained and fights, and just really like low education, low intellect, and
low opportunities too. Well, and I guess too, you probably take it a couple different ways, because I'm sure working in the system, you see the broken parts of the system, right? And then you see these children who really don't have a say in where they go or what they're doing or how to react.
They're involuntary. That is an involuntary setting. Yeah. So I had like beautiful stories happen too, right? Like, it's not just all pain and suffering. I had some kids that come up to me and they're like, oh, I love yoga and I want to be a yoga teacher. And I'm like, hell yeah, kid, find me when you get out there and we're going to like let the, you know, like light the world on fire. Like, you know, come find me. And so there's really beautiful moments like that too. And I don't know what I was doing to take care of myself at that time. I mean, I was seeing a therapist, but I wasn't really like equating my work to having to talk to anybody about it, because I thought I was handling it. And I have spiritual practices, and I would turn to my mat and I would turn to meditation, and I would share about it at the times I needed to. And this is where I was working with Harini and Laurel Ridge, and we loved working together with the kids. And so we would share, have debrief, and the organization and the people I were working for were, you know, responsible and trying to check in for our safety and what was happening. But really we needed more support. You know, I needed more support. I think they did too. And so I go into this healing session, and this woman is in my root, and she was like, wow, you were really blocked down there. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, start talking to me. And so I start reliving these experiences of these things and these stories that I saw when I was working in that space. Like, some of them really stick with you. And so we just kind of pulled all that shit out, you know?
Yeah. That's so interesting. So it's almost like it was just stuck energy from not being able to process or debrief, like you said, afterwards in a way that was for your body.
And this has been a year of separation, right? I left working at Laurel Ridge, I think in 21 or 20, the end of 21, 22. And I just met this energy healer this year. So this was like in April that I had this session with her, and I had been far away from that work for over like a year, if not longer. So now I'm still in the facility, right? With the kids with eating disorder is such a sick disease, man.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
It just is so dangerous. And some of these patients come in with, you know, this PTSD or whatever they're going through. And there's like a lot of intensity there too. So thank you for asking me that question, because I would like to continue to find ways to navigate how to heal that stuff. And my mentor teacher, who's wonderful and an activist and super into social justice and support too, we've talked about maybe finding like a therapist or someone who works with people, right? Like, not necessarily doesn't have to be like designated to just yoga teachers, but someone who's in the work and seeing these things, like finding an outlet or a resource for that. And
Yeah. I'm thinking like a somatic therapist.
yes.
Or a yoga therapist.
Yes.
Someone that
Yes.
has had experiences, both on traumatic sides and then being able to support you and how to process it. There's a great book that's called The Art of Holding Space by Heather Plett. And it talks more about not just holding space for other people, but how to hold space for yourself. Really interesting in the sense of like, okay, you've got, like she does diagrams of cells and she'll be like, here's a cell and another cell having an equal relationship, right? And they're both balanced. And then they'll show one where it's like a vampire energy, eating over another cell. But it really teaches you the vessel and like how to process things that you go through.
Yeah. And right now, a lot of that, the interpersonal works happens through prayer and meditation, to be honest. And through working with this energy healer, she's taught me a couple new rituals of how to like open and close my space. So when I'm going into these treatments or anytime I'm going into teaching, right, I try to open my space and ask for like a sense of protection. And then when I'm done, I close it. And so that's kind of like a new thing that I'm kind of experimenting with. And the first time I did it, I opened this space this way. She taught me, oh my God, I felt like nauseous. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. Like, what is this feeling? And it was really just, I'm trusting my alignment, right? I'm trusting my intuition. And when I'm actually implementing deep spiritual ritual practices in my life, like, yeah, my vessel is like feeling it. I was like, oh, I'm like tingling.
It's like, that's like, we talked about this in the last episode. We talked to a friend of ours and said, you get those nerves. Like I get nervous every time I teach a class, but those nerves are not scary. They're like almost necessary because it shows me I'm headed in the right direction. I'm okay. Rituals and kind of preparing yourself before and after class. Like I teach teachers yoga. And when I teach them, I'm like, okay, for me, wash your hands, wash your feet, right? Before you go in, and when you leave. It's like, for me, that's that, like, I'm actually washing away anything that I may be bringing in. I have a clean
like
slate.
Saucha, that purification, right?
And then being able to leave and wash my hands and my feet and go, I'm not going to carry anybody else's stuff with me today. But so how did you go from, so you became a yoga teacher, right? But when did you really notice, because we do usually ask this question, this would kind of been a little bit backwards, but when did you notice the change off your mat? And did anyone else notice a change in you off your mat after practicing for a long time?
Yeah, probably. Should probably like ask my previous relationships, let's see what they say. Yeah, I think my reaction time to like stimulus, right? Chaos, like turning left when I wanted to turn right, or, like this whole Aries full moon has just been like one thing after another. Like something was supposed to happen here and then it got rescheduled there. So I think what's happening off my mat is the ability to respond rather than react, to just be like, oh, okay, this is what's happening now. Let me take a couple deep breaths. I have a better sense of pausing, like pause, breath, orient, listen, like find out where I actually like look at my feet, be here now, and then move forward. And I think what's happening for me too is just a deeper sense of like listening to my body. So I don't know if other people notice this so much, but I eat better, right? Like I eat when I'm hungry. So maybe people do notice, because if I'm hungry, I'm a little bit of a wild woman, like I can't like think, or
You're hangry.
Yeah. Or if I haven't slept a lot, right? Delusion is a huge, delusion is kind of fun though. Like I kind of like being a little in the delirium place. So I think, maybe people notice that, right? Like I think what it is like attraction rather than promotion. So when we were talking about bringing friends and family to class, I've never found it to be successful to trying to manipulate them. Let me just be honest here.
Right. Exactly. Because they're not gonna.
If you come, I do this, or if you come, this will happen. Right. Like there's this element of like trying to control and manipulate and kind of like I can be really sneaky.
Yeah.
So I think what I've found is, there's a lot about attraction, right? Like people and friends and family and humans like come to me and come into class when they're ready, but it's not because I have like pushed them or forced them
or dangled a carrot in front of them.
Yeah. And a lot of people, it's so common when you teach yoga, like, where do you teach and what time? And I'm going to be there. And it's like, so I can tell you, like, I could have a quarter for every time someone tells me that and like doesn't
Be rich.
Oh my God,
yeah,
we
and
need to be
doesn't
fucking
show
loaded.
up, So I think, so I think too, that is happening for me off and on my mat is like, if I say I'm going to be somewhere or go to a class, like I go, and I show up. And recently I had a cool experience on a Friday night class I was teaching. A student came and she was also a teacher, and she's a Kundalini teacher at that. And she's like, oh, I teach here on Wednesday nights. Like, would love to have you to come. And so I was like, so what am I going to do on Wednesday night?
You're freaking going.
I'm going to her class, And there was a part of time in my life too that I maybe wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't really follow through because I would get nervous or it's vulnerable or I'm like, well, she probably doesn't remember. She's not going to know who I am. Like all this kind of like FOMO shit that happens.
The imposter syndrome.
Yes, totally. And so I think I'm not operating out of that anymore in my life. I'm operating out of like doing what I say I'm going to do. And I think that attracts people, whether I know it or not.
Big time. Well, I learned this in my 500-hour training. My mentor said, you have to lead from a place of inspiration rather than desperation. Right. And I think that that's a big thing with yoga teachers in general, like wanting to have a full-time job as a yoga teacher. If you're desperate for it, it's not going to happen. But if you work from your place of inspiration, it'll happen.
That's so beautiful. I love that you said that, because a part of my journey too has been things falling in my lap. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, as soon as I decided to take the journey to become a yoga teacher, like people were calling me, like, hey, especially with kids, like everyone, I was like, gosh, damn it. Like, really more kids. So there's times in my life, like even right now, that I turn things down. I have to turn things away. And that's like such a good gift to have. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, please, let's keep this up. But that really did happen for me. Almost all the jobs that I have, even up into my most recent contract. It's been a friend that I know. She's never even taken my yoga class. And she got me the job. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Like, she advocated so hard for me and got me the job. And I was like, wow, girl, cool. So that keeps happening. So I do believe that is what I'm seeing now in my life, is the attraction rather than the promotion is really manifesting, for lack of like a better word, but it is like manifesting into what is happening in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we asked you about, okay, so I did have one question about the yoga behind bars. Did you go and teach in any prisons or jails?
Laurel Ridge is kind of like a prison.
Is it?
It's
I don't know.
They can't leave.
It's like being committed for kids.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Like I've had students have to go.
Each door is locked, right? They have their unit and they go down their unit, but they can't get off their unit without like a staff member unlocking the door. They can't get outside without someone opening and closing the door. They have to be walked and escorted to dining hall. So that feels kind of like an incarcerated kind of environment. I've never been in a prison or a jail, anything like that. No.
That just makes my heart break. But then there's hope because you're there.
Thank you for saying that.
You know what I mean? Like to me, that a facility like that is used to having to control and rehabilitate or quasi-rehabilitate, I guess. I don't know. I don't know that much about it. But, for them to embrace the idea of yoga.
Well, it's hard because I think what I battled against is like in a big corporation, that's kind of like a bureaucracy, that place, right? They don't see yoga as a professional, right? So I don't think
we're definitely not professionals at all, for sure. Fucking I hate that so much.
I hate that so much. So that was really a lot of like the battle I ran into, right? Is like, I'm there to come in and offer this service and do this job. I'm not there to wrangle the kids. I am not there to, be crisis convention. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes it happens. Like I, go with the flow, but, like whoever is working on staff there is responsible for watching the group and making sure that the kids show up and things like that. So yeah, I think in that industry or those places, it is really hard anywhere I go, I think, to be seen as a professional, as a yoga teacher.
It really is. I mean, how many hours does it take to get a 4-year college degree? Do you know how many credit hours you need to take to get a degree? Because I want to say it's less than 200. I could be wrong. I probably am wrong.
I have no idea.
No, I mean, it's 18 hours per semester typically. And so it's 8 semesters. It's less than 200, but I'm going to disagree that it's equivalent to a 200.
It's definitely not equivalent. A college degree is not equivalent to a 200-hour. What I'm saying, though, is that the time that we invest in our training and in our practice and in the way that we have to hold space for others is valuable.
Not only time and money. Yeah, you're spending,
thousands
of dollars on a teacher training, and then you're spending money to go to practice. So
but I also find it interesting that in the fitness world, they take a personal training class and a cert. That's it. There's not really much else to do. Whereas for us, and I am a personal trainer, I've been through the certification process, I've done all that stuff. It just doesn't make sense. We ask this of our guests that if you can remember or pinpoint a time when you were on your mat and you had that samadhi moment, that bliss, right? Where everything was just firing all at once and you were like, yes, this is exactly, aha, God light shining down on you, the whole thing. Do you have any of those moments on your mat?
I love that question. I looked at that question earlier and I was like, how the hell do I answer that? Because yes, I feel like I have those moments all the time. I mean, really every time I'm teaching, I've been teaching 3 years and I still write down almost every flow. I prepare for it. I write it all down. I mean, most of the times, there's very few times that I actually don't write something down, but, and every time I teach it, right, I follow what's on the paper for the most part, but it's also no class is ever the same, ever. And I improvise from what I don't even plan to improvise and it happens. So in those moments, I feel totally in flow. I just feel like it is not me. It is the wisdom of these teachers that have taught yoga, have brought yoga. They are literally working through my vessel to hopefully let the student hear what they need to hear. And I ask to not be in control of that. Honestly, I ask to just when I'm opening space, right? I'm like, okay, the wisdom of these teachers come through me to speak through these students and let me not interfere, right? Let me not attach. And so right now, I feel really humbled because my life feels in flow all the time. I mean, not all the time. That's a, overgeneralization, but most of the time, I feel very connected and very in flow and, where I'm out of body, right?
Yeah.
I'm not, it's not logical what's happening.
No, I get it. I write down every class. I've got a whole bookshelf full of every class I've taught for 10 years now, and it's just crazy because I go back and I look at some of the stuff and I'm like, wow, okay. It's not really, we're not reinventing the wheel.
No,
it's a bunch of poses. We just organize them differently, but we're not going to be like, oh my God, we discovered this new transition. It's like, nope, it's been done before. All right. So what can others learn from your story?
Wow, what a profound question. I hope that others can learn it's possible to jump off the ledge. It's possible to not know what the fuck you're doing and still be wildly successful and happy and secure. I hope that others learn that it will be messy, but that you're not alone. And that I hope really so much of my teaching with these patients who have been affected by trauma, right? We're really offline. There's so much disassociation in our body, and there's so much associating with, for lack of a better word, negative feeling, right? I feel pain, I feel tension, I feel discomfort. And what I really hope for students or people practicing yoga on their journey is to come back online, find sensation in your body that feels enjoyable, that brings joy, that brings pleasure, and move away from the feelings of tension and discomfort. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I hope people learn that from my journey is like, we're not responsible for what other people receive. Like the biggest part of teaching is to find detachment from what a student is going to experience. Like they may love me, they may hate me, they may have everything in between. They may come back all the time. They may come back none of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but that I am still okay with who I am and what I'm teaching and what I'm offering, regardless of whatever outcome
I love that.
is going to happen.
Thank you so much for sharing your story,
Yeah.
Amanda. That was lovely. We really appreciate your time and
Thank
your
you.
openness, being vulnerable and talking about, your journey through yoga is definitely going to impact others. And for anyone out there listening who works in mental health facilities, bring yoga teachers in to help.
But yoga teachers who have discernment, right? Like
Thank you.
You can't, that has been a little bit of a part of my journey is, yes, we are yoga teachers and we're offering this beautiful gift, but it can also cause harm if you do not have a background in learning how to communicate with these people and have any type of training that is in a trauma-informed setting. Please do your research. Please find teachers that have had the experience. Just because you're a yoga teacher doesn't mean you can help someone's
You're a
mental
therapist.
health.
Yeah, you're not a therapist. Yeah,
Exactly.
true.
Exactly.
So true.
So please, do what you need to do to vet out the people who have the experience, have the language, have the resources to take care of themselves before you're putting them in those environments, because we really can cause harm. I don't think that as a yoga teacher, I never would have thought that. I never would have believed that. Like even, a couple of years ago, I'd be like, no, there's no harm in yoga. But I'll give you just a brief example, and I know we're wrapping up, but in the eating disorder facility, right? Some of them, they're so self-conscious about their body, right? That if I say stomach, they could get turned away. If I say belly button, they could, disassociate just by hearing those words. So it's really changed my language. So I have to cue now and I say, come onto the front of your body, right? Rather than come onto your belly or your stomach.
That's so interesting.
It's been really hard. I'll tell you, it's been really challenging to learn how to identify different parts of our body in this way. But if you have teachers who just don't know that, or they just don't have the awareness, or they just don't have a training in that, we can cause harm, and I don't
that's not our job.
I don't want to, it's hard to admit that, right? Like it's hard to say it out loud because I think this part could make people really uncomfortable. It makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I believe that it's true.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I do feel like, words 100% matter. And sometimes it's super duper hard to kind of come to that place and space where you're like, even just saying stomach, like how much you have to watch your words and how gentle you have to be with words. Sometimes it's hard. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you
Amanda.
for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome. It's so much fun.
Sweet. I have to say that Amanda's story really touched me in a way that, I don't know, just she has such a cool energy about her when I first met her, and she walks in and she's just got this like cool vibe to her, but she's also really tender and sweet and kind, but she has like a little badass side to her too. I really admire the fact that she works in a lot of mental health facilities, because for me to see people that are younger, that are in these kind of facilities that need help, to know that they have someone like Amanda makes me feel really great.
I was going to say, I instantly picked up on her presence. And for me, it was a very subtle but present confidence. Like Amanda is herself. She's very self-aware. She's obviously done the work of getting to know herself, even down to this idea of she thought she would never work with children, but at the end of the day, it's her calling, right? That's something that I can relate to. I was like, I will never be a teacher. And then I repeatedly go back to the middle school classroom, right?
Right.
And so she definitely just has a self-awareness that a lot of people do not have the privilege to have. But of course, at the same time, it's obviously taken some work, right? She's been going through a practice of self-study and of yoga for years and years and years, right? And has had to kind of comb through these difficult situations and these difficult life moments, and these teachings to kind of come to this peace. At least that's what I got from her. I was very calm in her presence. I felt very assured, and I think it's because she herself has a calming and reassuring presence, which comes from knowing yourself.
Totally. The fact that she studied so much as well and she really put the effort and the energy into it. I think it is really funny that she said, like, I didn't want to work with kids anymore, but kids kept coming back into her life. The same thing with you. And I feel like that is a trait or a characteristic that both of you have that is super powerful, that a lot of us wish we could have that, you know, that ability to connect with kids on their level to make them feel comfortable, but then also like introducing yoga to them. And in like a really, I mean, I can't imagine being a kid, being in a facility where I'm locked up and I'm locked in a room and I can't go out and I can't do these things, and like what that would do to a child's psyche. But then to be able to know that they're providing people like Amanda to go in and teach yoga classes and breathing and meditation. It's like we're giving them something that they can take with them, that they can embody, right?
And I was going to say also that she's continuously called back, kind of despite the trauma that she's witnessing. Because I'll say there's something about, you know, of course, like you mentioned, being a child or a teen who's in this facility where you really have no control.
No,
right?
yeah.
Like you're required to be there. Your schedule is set. You have to follow it. It's a very strict routine in a way that lacks some autonomy, right?
Yeah, it's like prison. It's like them being in prison. Totally.
Yeah. And then to be an adult in that situation, and simultaneously Amanda has no control, right? I mean, that's how I felt at some of my past campuses of like, I have no control. Like, yes, I'm able to do what I can, but there are times and moments where it maybe doesn't feel enough. Like, yes, what a blessing or what an opportunity for Amanda to be there, but to simultaneously be faced with, and that's all I can do.
Yeah,
right.
that's
I can't
right.
take them from the situation. I can't change what put them here. I can't do anything beyond this hour that I have with them.
Right.
And that is a really, really hard place to be as an adult who has full autonomy. And in so many situations, right, and in our own lives, we're able to say, I have control, and if I don't, I'm going to switch it so that I do have control.
Yes.
Or I can do this thing, and if I can't, I'm going to make it so that I can. And that's a really, really tough place to be that I don't think people realize how heavy that can weigh on you, right? As an individual that has full autonomy to then go in and say, and now I don't.
Right. Well, plus the fact that she had said too that like the people that worked there, she had like an assist, like an aide or someone that was with them at all times, but she could not, quote unquote, fix anyone in that room, nor could any of us. But the fact that she was able to go in and hold space for those kids in a way that gave them a little bit of freedom, if at least the freedom was inside, it may not have been outside. But I think a lot about, especially since COVID, I think a lot about first responders. I think a lot about people that work in the mental health facilities, people that are teachers, you know, people that deal with children or young adults on a regular basis or trauma on a regular basis. That where is their outlet? Where is their support, right? That was one thing that she said was really important to her when she had to left one facility to go to another was, I need the support or at least the debriefing time or the time to process what trauma I'm being exposed to, right? Like you just don't know how you're going to handle those situations and how it's going to attach to you.
Definitely. And I think thinking about that idea of that internal control or that internal peace brings me to kind of my overall theme for Amanda's episode. The thing that stood out to me was when we asked her what brought her back to the mat, right? She had those hot tears in Shavasana. She had just experienced loss. She's 19,
Yeah.
right? On her mat and is sobbing. And I asked, what brought you back to something that could be probably really overwhelming, right?
Oh,
To a
totally.
19-year-old who's never experienced something like that before, or has experiences a huge release, but you don't know why, right? Like, I think we can understand crying after something traumatic or crying in the face of grief, but after a yoga class, I shouldn't be crying, right? Like, that's what we
Right.
think. I shouldn't be crying right now. What's going on? And so that idea, or when she said, I wanted to see if it was real,
Mm.
right? And like, how many of us can relate to that? Like, I felt this transformation in a yoga class, right? This internal peace, this internal release, this internal breaking
Yeah.
of the dam, right? Was this real? Right? We doubt ourselves. And I find that so much. I mean, that's why this yoga podcast name is what it is, right? How yoga changed my life. Because so many students have come up to me, to you, right? And said, I know this sounds silly, but yoga changed my life. Or I know it sounds silly, but yoga has done X or Y or Z for me. And it's not silly. It's a
No.
science, right? It's not silly. It's a thousands of year old practice that has these benefits. And so, she said, I wanted to see if it was real. Right.
Yeah.
And she just kept coming back. And there was times where it was intermittent. There was times where it was very dedicated and committed. And for me, Adrienne and I dove through a lot of sutras, and a sutra came up to me, but also the the limb or practice of Pratyahara
Yeah.
came up for me. So first I'll go with the sutra.
Okay.
And this comes from book 4, Sutra 20, so 420. The mind stuff cannot perceive both subject and object simultaneously, right? And so in this section of the sutras, they're talking about how the mind, or like the true mind, what they call it here is the purusa. It's almost like your consciousness, right? Has this ability to observe everything that's going on in our mind, the chatter. But it doesn't have the ability to observe itself and the chatter at the same time. And I think kind of that's what happens in those moments of Shavasana where we're broken down into tears. It's that we're observing ourselves, right? We're having this moment of realization, which is what reminded me of Pratyahara, right? So withdrawal of the senses is kind of how we get to these moments of meditation, of peace, of inner release. And I also think that kind of relates to what she's offering people, right? What she's offering these teens and these youth who have nothing in their control, right?
Nothing at all. Yeah.
I mean, and that's something that I struggle with the most. One of the sutras also, I can't remember, but when we discussed it when I was in college, I took a yoga class, and it was something to the effect of like, you could be in a prison, but if you have yoga, you're okay. And it pissed me off.
I don't like
I
when
was
people
so
say
mad.
that. Yeah.
Right. I was
Yeah.
so mad, but it's like, I mean, it's the same idea of what we're saying about these kids, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
at least you have yoga. Like,
Yeah. And it's like,
but
it's nothing for them. And it's
yeah,
almost like, when people say, when you get older and you have kids, then you'll know. It's like when people say those kind of weird quotes to you, it's like, oh yeah, but you have a yoga, you can be kidnapped, but you have your meditation practice. It's like,
yeah,
yoga is not only about for the inside, but it's how you show up outside too, right? So it's both sided. It's both internal and external. It's not just this internal practice. And I think that that's kind of where the frustration may lie when people say that, like, oh, but you could be in prison and you still have your yoga practice. Yes, and you still need human connection and to be free and to have the abilities to do other things. But it is a great tool. It's a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
And people just don't realize it.
Yeah, I think it's just that it feels diminishing of kind of our experiences or whatever it may be. But all that to say, of course, still dive into the tool and dive into this resource that you have that is a yoga practice. And so to talk a little bit more about Pratyahara, it is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. So we talk about the different limbs a lot on the podcast, and most folks are familiar with asana, or like the physical practice. And there are 8, asana being one of them and Pratyahara being another. And so Adrienne, how would you describe Pratyahara to people?
So Pratyahara is like the removal of the senses, right? So it's the idea of not letting anything else distract you from what you're doing. So for example, when I was in my teacher training classes, we did one whole practice where we practiced a set sequence that we all knew blindfolded. And so the idea is to remove one sense and then be able to either lean on others, right? Or understand how that sense impacts you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have a little mini passage from one of my favorite books, which is Meditations from the Mat. And it says, Pratyahara is the decision to turn inward, to let go of drama. It is the choice to release our grip on the external world and all our attempts to control it in order to focus our minds entirely on the internal. And I think that's kind of that experience, right? That experience in Shavasana where we finally, like, we hit that samadhi, right? We hit some flow, we hit some internal peace. And for Amanda at 19, right, after experiencing a loss, it was tears. And she wanted to know if it was real. And so she came back and it was, right? When she was able to kind of get in this flow of a very intense, a very hot practice, and all these other things dropped away, what was there for her was grief, right? Grief that wasn't really processed. Like she said, no one had sat her down and said, your dad is going to die.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And at 19, who knows how to process these things? And so what was left for her was grief. And she went back, and I think this was, I would imagine, some part of internalizing it or working through it or, right, combing through the tangles of grief and of life and of reality. And that's what turning inward can do, right? When you're able to shut out the external, right? And not in a negative way, because sometimes we like to shut out everything around us. But a lot of times, I think when people say, oh, I'm shutting everything out, what they mean is I'm shutting everything that's inside out.
Or I'm shutting down.
Shutting out, or I'm shutting down. Exactly. But when you are able to take away the distractions, because that's what it is. We will distract ourselves with a TV show, with a podcast, with eating, with a book, with friends, with filling up our schedules and staying really, really busy or trying to solve other people's problems. But when you shut out the external distractions, those external senses, and you turn inward, there's nothing there but you, right? And there's nothing there but what you are ultimately dealing with or facing with, and that mind chatter, right?
Yeah.
And so when we can also even close out the mind chatter, right? So talking about that sutra, and actually have that mirror of holding up Purusa to itself, right? The conscious brain and mind to itself is, right, the goal. It's hard. You can't stay there for long, but it allows us to, I don't know, face ourselves. And it's hard. It's hard. That's been, I mean, for me, one of the hardest things about yoga is facing myself.
Absolutely. Well, and it's facing yourself without judgment, right? Or without the idea of being bad or being good. You know, it's like, who am I at my core? How do I find that, right? It's not about going around and digging into other people's trash or other people's business. It's about that immediate ability to sit and see what's there, right?
Yeah. And I'll say this, when you're in that seat, when you're in that moment, there isn't judgment, at least for me, right?
Yeah.
There is not I can't subscribe judgment to it because I'm strictly in a moment that it's hard to explain. It's devoid of it.
Yeah.
You're just there in reality. And that's what I think is shocking and overwhelming, and where these tears come from, because you have this realization of, this is me, right? Or this is what's happening, or this is what I've been ignoring, or this is what I've been avoiding. And now I'm face to face with it, and there is no judgment in it. But then when you like come out of that moment, that's when the tears come for me. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is what I've been avoiding. This is what I haven't wanted to admit to myself, or this is what I haven't been able to accept about myself. Sometimes it's good things, right? Like in my yoga teacher training, I've shared this with Adrienne. I grew up Catholic, and I grew up getting in trouble all the time. And it's so silly. I really had not realized it till I was 21 when I went through yoga teacher training. But because I was always in trouble, always in trouble is the best way I can put it in school. I thought that I was not only a sinner, but evil.
Oh, yeah.
I had internalized that I was an evil person. And then even as I moved away from religion later in high school and in college, I still was like, I'm a bad person. Like, that's what I thought about myself. Like, no matter how much good I did or I put into the world or like things I did for others, if you had asked me, I'd be like, yeah, but I'm kind of like a bad person. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
still not that good of a person. Like, I literally and legitimately thought that I was a bad person. And there was a moment in yoga teacher training that I had this realization, right? That everything else fell away and it wasn't about things I'd done or hadn't done or said or hadn't said or whatever else. It's that I realized that that is what I had internalized about myself and it wasn't true, right? Like and crazy realization because I hadn't particularly thought about it in a long time, right? Like I hadn't been heavily involved in the Catholic Church or I hadn't thought about myself as a sinner by any means anymore. I didn't really believe in that, but I did still think of myself as evil or a bad person. And so sometimes it's even positive realizations that I am not evil.
Right.
I am not a bad person.
Right.
But it took a long time because that's mind chatter, right? That's
Oh,
what
big time.
my head is telling me. And so sometimes it's positive realizations. When your true self and your consciousness is able to see itself. So yeah, there's no way. And so when you're in it, there is no judgment. There's no feelings. It's just like realization.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's like, you want to be back there all the time, but it just doesn't always work that way.
I know that's the other thing is like, we're talking about like this, that in Shavasana, you have these moments every time. It's like, nope, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it takes you too long to drop in. It takes your mind too long to settle and you run out of time and you end up not hitting that place. But being open to that place is super important. A lot of people avoid Shavasana completely. They will just get up and leave. A lot of places will encourage us to leave our students in the room and not help guide them out. And there's many different practices that you can take on it. But in my opinion, when I see students that leave early and they don't stay for Shavasana and they're like kind of rushing through their day, that's when I encourage them. Hey, come back. It's 5 minutes. Even if you have to leave early, I'll tap you on the shoulder when it's time for you to take 5 minutes of Shavasana before you have to be out the door. So while we're doing, hip work, you're going to be in 5 minutes Shavasana. Just so that they have that moment. And it takes time for people to kind of release that hold on control.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's control, right? It's controlling. They think it's weird. It feels weird. You're just laying there. You feel like you should be doing something else. And it's just take a couple of breaths. It's not the end of the world. Like, how many times a day do you waste 3 to 5 minutes? You waste time all the time. But this time is built into the practice so that you can have these blissful moments, these moments of seeing yourself clearly, or even working through things that may have been buried or put in a closet. Cool.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, thank you for sharing your story with us. It obviously got us thinking and talking. Your confidence is extremely reassuring. It's extremely calming. Your presence is one that I'm gravitating to just listening to it again, right? Like we re-listened to our podcast before we discussed it, and it's beautiful. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, she's a special one. She's really special. I find myself thinking about her often, and just the amount of like happiness that she brings to my heart, knowing that she's out there doing the things that she's doing in the yoga community that fits her talents the best, and she's making an impact. And not all the time are yogis considered to be educated and individuals that should be in other places besides yoga studios. Like should we be
professionals?
Yeah, we're not seen as professionals or whatever, but we are professional. And Amanda epitomizes that to me because of the way that she carries herself and the way that she deals with her students. And yeah, I'm excited for what comes next for her and seeing where her journey takes her next.
Yeah. And to our listeners, I hope Pratyahara wasn't too abstract. I know it can be hard to kind of grasp these concepts that are not physical, right? That's why asana, I think, is so attractive, because we can physically achieve it in our body, right? Even if we can't achieve certain poses, we can achieve a number of them and we can work towards them. And that feels very tangible to us. And Pratyahara is not that.
No.
And so I hope that in our next episode, you're able to experience a little bit of that removal of the senses and turning inward. We always like to do a follow-up episode that is a practice. If you're someone who doesn't tend to check those out, and you're also sitting here like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, what? Like, I know that feeling. I've been there. Then the next episode is for you. And as much as you avoid them, this is the one, right? To check out and see if you can experience that dropping in with us.
Yeah. And remember that all of our even episodes are the exercises, the journaling, the breathing, the meditation practices. And then all of our odd episodes are the interviews with our guests. So next week, we will have Amanda's follow-up episode. It'll be an even number. Actually, it'll be episode 40 next week. We're at 39 this week. So pretty exciting. We've just had so much fun doing this podcast, and it's just growing nice and slowly for us, and we appreciate it. So share this with your friends or with people that maybe aren't really sure on yoga or have tried yoga or want to learn more. Send them a couple of the even number episodes, that little short practices that they could try out that aren't movement based. None of them are movement based, which is kind of nice. I think it's good to show the other 7 limbs of yoga just to all, because that's really what it's about.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, follow us on the gram and on the TikTok at Yoga Changed. Share your stories with us. We'd love to hear from you and how yoga changed your life. Send us a DM or a message through yogachanged@gmail.com. And that's all I got. What do you got? Anything else? We're good?
That's it.
Cool. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.